Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. Today's interview is with Tahmina Watson, an immigration attorney practicing in Seattle, Washington, that has a focus on entrepreneur and startup visa issues. In the interview, we discuss her international background, the British legal system, how she marketed and got the word out about her practice, her new book, the upcoming elections, practice management, potential changes to the EB-5 system, and much more. Before we start, I want to give you an idea to think about. The successful CEO of Oracle, Larry Ellison, said, quote, "Always have a vision." Another similar quote is from chess grandmaster Jose Raul Capablanca, quote, "In order to improve your game, you must study the end game before everything else," end quote. The conclusion of this is to visualize your goals and where you are going to be able to get there. This will help you battle the nervousness and insecurity you may deal with in what you're doing. Also, at the end of the interview, I mentioned an L1B premium processing application I have had pending for 14 days. I'm super excited to say that it was approved on the 15th day. Finally, this is my first long-distance interview done completely digitally, so please excuse some of the microphone crackle that comes up. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult an immigration attorney for specific information related to your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. Hi everyone. Today's interview is with immigration attorney and author Tahmina Watson. Tahmina obtained her law degree from Brunel University in London, England, and practiced mainly criminal defense in that country. She relocated to the U.S. in 2005 and was admitted to the New York State Bar. Her current practice is headquartered in Seattle, Washington. Prior to founding Watson Immigration Law, Tahmina was a partner at White & Watson, practicing exclusively in the area of U.S. immigration and naturalization law. Tahmina's new book, entitled The Startup Visa, Key to Job Growth and Economic Prosperity in America, History and Legislation, has been getting a lot of attention and has even led to an interview by Forbes magazine. You can learn more about Tahmina by visiting www.immigrationlawyersinseattle.com. Hi Tahmina, how are you?
Hi, John. I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk to you today. There's so much I can learn from you. Let's just get into it. Let me know more about yourself and where you came from and how you got to where you are right now.
Well, I was born in London, UK. When I was 8 years old, my father, who was an immigration lawyer in the UK, an immigration barrister in the UK, he decided to take us to Bangladesh. And so at 8, I went to the capital of Bangladesh, Dhaka. I was there for 10 years and moved around within the country a few times and then returned to Dhaka. I took my high school, secondary school examinations there and actually did pretty well. There are boards there, and I came 7th in the board out there and 4th among the girls. When I returned to London when I was 18, I went to college and then I went to university. College means high school in England. And then when I went to university, I studied law as an undergraduate degree. After my degree, I went to law school, where one learns how to be a lawyer through practical training. And I went to a school called Inns of Court School of Law. That used to be the traditional school for barristers. And barristers are trial attorneys, which is different from transactional attorneys in England. There's a big difference there. And I was a member of the Honourable Society of the Middle Temple. There are 4 inns, and traditionally these 4 inns, Inner Temple, Middle Temple, Gray's Inn, and Lincoln's Inn, they would have their students go to the Inns of Court to learn how to be a lawyer, and when they graduate, the graduation happens at the inn at which they are a member. So my graduation was at Middle Temple. After becoming a barrister, or graduating from law school rather, in England one has to do what's called a pupillage, essentially an apprenticeship, hands-on training, almost like a doctor getting residency. And you do that for 1 year. If you are a solicitor, which is the transactional attorney, then that traineeship is for 2 years. My first pupillage was at a chambers called Bridewell Chambers, and those pupillages are often broken down into two parts: the first 6 months and the second 6 months, and often referred to as the first six or the second six. And the first six, you really shadow, you learn, you write, you observe. In the second six, you then go and represent clients in court under the supervision of your pupil master or trainee.
To get those, I know the number of law students in the U.S. was booming. It's gotten a little lower recently, but I'm assuming England is the same. Was it hard to get a pupillage position? Was there a lot of demand for that kind of thing?
Very much so. Very difficult. And the first year, I actually didn't get my pupillage. And there are years where people don't get pupillages at all for many years in a row. And without the pupillage, you can't qualify as a barrister. So when I didn't get it the first year, and you're up again Oxbridge, and and I went to Brunel University, but what sets you apart is your experience. And I thought I had a lot of experience. During my university years, I did work experiences, mini pupillages, and I thought I checked all the boxes, but I still didn't get one. So that year I had to do a lot of soul searching and thought to myself, well, my goodness, all I wanted to do in my life is be a barrister. How do I set myself apart? I dedicated my entire year to pro bono work. There are many legal organizations, like one was called Disability Law Center, dealing with, on a pro bono basis for people with disabilities. Employment law issues. I mean, you name it, there are legal clinics that would help. So I dedicated myself to offering my little knowledge and services to people that needed help. And these organizations would typically take law students for a 3-hour sort of slot in a week. And what I did, I thought to myself, what is important to me? What are the things that excite me? Where does my passion lie? And at that time, it was really helping women and helping children. And there was one summer where I helped children with disabilities. And I thought to myself, I'm going to help disabilities when I'm a hotshot lawyer. And I realized, who knows if I'll ever be a hotshot lawyer? I'm just going to help these children now. And I found the Disability Law Service that not only helped people legally with children, but they helped in consumer law and employment law and education law and many other things. So instead of just taking up 3 hours in a week to help these organizations, I dedicated 2 days to each of these two organizations that I worked with. One was called Rights of Women, and the other one was a Disability Law Service. And during the other times, I was running a student group called the Bar Vocational Human Rights Group, helping people get internships and understand how they can get more experience. And during the time I was at the Disability Law Service, I somehow managed to get training into educational law, where I was helping parents who needed their children to get extra help at school. So I for the entire year, I was doing so much pro bono work. So when the second time round came along for applying pupillages, I had set myself apart. And I was very lucky, very, very lucky to get the pupillage that I did. So it is very competitive. Things have changed over the last 10 years. And I think it has only grown more and more competitive.
Was your father licensed to practice law in Britain as well, or is he licensed to practice in Bangladesh?
He was a British barrister, and in the olden days, he qualified in the 70s. In the olden days, immigration law wasn't the sexy thing to do, just like it wasn't here either. Mm-hmm. So he was one of the earlier immigration practitioners in those days. But when he went to Bangladesh and came back, it was difficult to pick the practice up again. But he did okay, and I learned a lot from him.
So he was doing equivalent of removal defense in our lingo, or would it be like?
Yeah, he did removal. He did a lot of corporate immigration. I mean, in the latter part of life where I learned a lot, he was doing transactional immigration as well as asylum, defensive asylum cases, affirmative asylum cases. In the younger days, when I was very small and he was practicing, his practice, wasn't just immigration; it was a lot more than that. In the very olden days.
How different is immigration law in Great Britain?
My only exposure was really to the asylum world, and I don't think it's that different. But to be honest, I had such a small exposure that I really can't tell you anymore now that I've been practicing U.S. immigration for so long. But ultimately, the grounds are very similar, I believe. And then, of course, there's the human rights, act that people rely on a lot out there. So yeah, it's similar but different. The tribunal system is similar to the immigration court, but yeah, similar but different, if I could put it that way.
Now, what made you make the decision to jump the pond and come this side?
A bit like Sleepless in Seattle, the movie. I had a blind date with my husband. I was set up with him by a family member when I was visiting after my UK bar exams. It was my holiday to get over the immigrations, the bar exam studying that I had done. And I met my husband, Tom Watson, who was a patent attorney at the time. He's still a patent attorney. But I was, he was already practicing as an attorney, and I was a budding lawyer. So these family members and friends thought it would be a good idea to set us up, and the rest is history. I was dating him for a while, and then eventually got married and moved to the US in 2005.
We have another thing in common. My fiance is an attorney, and she's going to be taking the Penn bar next year. So.
Oh, how interesting! Wow.
You're going to get some tidbits from him later about how the practice goes.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up here. And when it came to practicing law in the US, it was rather a big challenge. So I thought to myself, when I was researching a lot, I wanted to be a Washington State lawyer, but I fell short for the experience that was required to take the bar exams. And I was advised on many occasions go back to law school. And by that point, I'd studied so much, I was not going to go to law school again.
I can't imagine, I'm a big reader, but I can't imagine going back to school after law school and just doing it again. It's just not something that's possible.
Yes, me too. So I didn't do that. And then in Washington State, I continued to research how can I get by without going to law school. And in Washington State, there's something called the Rule 6 program where you can shadow somebody for several years and learn essentially like an apprenticeship, how to be a lawyer and then take the bar exams. And that wasn't going to be the path I take because that will take many, many years. Mm-hmm. So then I took the New York bar exams. And because with a common law degree, you are eligible to take the New York bar exams as well as the Californian bar exams, actually. And then when I had the choice between the California and the New York bar exams, I then looked at what were the differences between the two. And New York had reciprocity with Washington State, mm-hmm. and California did not. The California exam was also a 3-day exam as opposed to a 2-day exam in New York. So those two things, and mainly the reciprocity, really made me take the New York bar. And then when I took the New York bar exams, I thought, well, I could be a lawyer in Washington State and put a little note near my name that admitted in New York. And it wasn't as easy to get a job because my resume read very differently to everybody else. I had a UK resume, and the jargon is different. In the UK, a legal assistant is essentially a paralegal. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that. So my resume read legal assistant, attorney. So I think it looked very odd. But in hindsight, I realized that I didn't know it at the time because I thought I looked wonderful. I had so much paralegal experience. So then when an immigration job came my way, initially I didn't want to do that because in my mind, immigration was just asylum. And it came up a couple of times. And then the third time round, I thought, let me just do this for a little while because it seems to be the option that keeps cropping up. And then I'll wave into Washington in due course and then do litigation, which seemed the better thing to do with my background. And then when I started practicing immigration law on the very first day, I was just astounded at how good a fit it was for me. With the languages that I can speak, with the challenge that the law is, both procedurally and substantively, how fast moving it is, how effective it can be in somebody's life, and how, I immigrated. I had just recently got my green card. I had personal experience of, the frustration that comes with waiting for a work permit. And,
now, did you hire an attorney to your work? Did you do it yourself?
No, we did. Oddly enough, my husband and I both, even though we're lawyers, we hired a lawyer because it was just too difficult to figure out.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not your field. So we hired somebody, and that's how I got my green card. But now it's a great story to tell my clients. And when they say I feel frustrated, I absolutely understand it. I myself, before I got the green card and I was traveling back and forth to see my husband, I was the one at the airport, trying to convince the immigration officer, no, I'm not getting married. Please let me in. I have a job in England. I faced all of those things, but at the time I didn't know that I was very close to being kicked out several times. But now I have the personal experience to share with my clients, warn them. I've even had horrible experiences at the Canadian border. I come from a Muslim background, and London at the time in 2007 was going through some terrorist bombings, and there was heightened security issues everywhere in the world. And when I was traveling back and forth to the US and Canada, I've had personal challenges myself. My husband, who is American born, his name is Tom Watson, he started to face problems at the border as well. I have so much personal experience to share with my clients and relate to them that the job is made easier in that sense. And the trust in me from my client is that much more.
Yeah. And see, my cases too is always remember it's a person. And sometimes I get frustrated with my clients when I ask for the same document 10 times. But I always have to put myself in their shoes and be like, they have to go through this, they're going through this problem. Like, just to have more understanding. And it's really important to have that to make a good relationship with your clients and have a good reputation in that end.
Right.
So you came from London, you relocated to Seattle, Washington, a beautiful city, and did you practice with somebody else, or did you start your own firm? What was the next step?
The lawyer who helped me get my immigration, my papers, my green card, as life would have it, needed help. So I started working with her, and that's where my partnership came from. I worked with her for 2 years, and that was essentially my foundation into immigration law. But I quickly had to really be self-sufficient. And then eventually the partnership wasn't working well. So my husband is an incredibly supportive person, and for a long time he had been saying to me, why don't you start your own firm? And I was nervous. I wasn't sure that I could do it on my own. But with his encouragement, his support, in 2009, I started my own practice.
Oh, wow, 2009. That's the toughest year to start your own practice.
Really, yes. I was a little bit scared, but I had nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. I thought to myself, my husband's behind me, and what do I need to do? I have his love and support.
And at that time, you had no children?
I had no children, thankfully. And I had one employee part-time. Mm-hmm. And what happened thereafter was that I didn't realize this over the last 2 years where I was building my reputation, but the reputation had already been fundamentally embedded into society in our local community, that in 2009 I was getting sufficient clients to support my employee and do good work. And as the years have gone by, the business has grown. What's interesting is my blog in 2008, I started a blog, but I used to stare at it in 2008. I'm like, what do I write? I don't know how to write. Who's going to read my writing? Who might even write about this? And when I opened my firm in 2009, a new South Asian newspaper had come to be. They started essentially this new publication, and they needed writers. And the editor called me saying, Tahmina, we'd love for you to write for us. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Thank you for asking me, but I have no idea what to write about. So the editor basically said, Tahmina, you know so much, just write about how to get citizenship. And that was my very first article that I wrote on immigration, afresh for a publication in 2009. And then I continued to write for them, which then became a part of my blog. And also, when I moved here in 2005, I didn't really know many people. So for me, I needed to meet people. And the way I did that was to volunteer for bar associations. So I was a board member of various bar associations where I started to meet people. But I would organize these events. And remember, at law school in England, I was already doing similar things. So it wasn't, it was almost natural to do organizing of CLEs and events and networking events and student events. So I would take a lot of photos of these events, and the Washington Women Lawyers, King County chapter, or the American Bar Association of Washington and South Asian Bar Association of Washington. They would write things on their websites, and my name would come up. So I had several clients say to me, oh, Tahmina, I see that you've done such and such with the Bar Association. I'm so glad to see it. So then I started to put those events on my blog. That this is what I was doing, and I started to write about news updates and commentary, and my blog started to take a life of its own. And what I didn't realize, I'm just sitting behind the computer and I'm seeing followers add, but I don't know who these followers are. I don't know who the readers are. It was becoming interactive, but I didn't realize a lot of lawyers started to follow me. In addition to just clients writing questions, readers writing questions. As the business was growing, my blog was growing, and this was all happening organically. It's not like I was thinking that this is the next thing to do.
How often would you post on the blog?
Sometimes I'd be inspired and write every day. Sometimes I would be writing once a week. In the last few weeks, I haven't written much. It really is about what is out there that I feel is important to share with my readers. But, to me, it was second nature. I didn't think about it too much. When I speak to colleagues, I often hear, well, I don't have time. To me, it wasn't about time as much as it was like, I need to do this. It's part of my daily work. It was something I just didn't think about too much and just did it. So the blog really took a life of its own, which really started to put me on the map.
The blog actually helped you find clients?
I don't know if people never would say that I'm coming to you through the blog, but I think it really established credibility.
They put your name in Google, they see that you're not a flyby, that you actually exist and you've done work, so it helps legitimacy. Now, do you do social media marketing, or do you have a presence in social media other than your blog?
I do. Over time, I have presence. It's not like I have an active sort of social media campaign. I have a Twitter account where I have a lot of followers. I have a Facebook page where I have some followers. But my blog is really the main thing that I just basically share out. I don't do anything separately with the other accounts.
Okay.
So much.
Now, what kind of practice have you developed? What areas of immigration law do you focus on?
When I was in my partnership many years ago, the practice was predominantly family-based, asylum-based, a little bit of business. But over the time, when I opened my own practice, my business sort of steered towards business immigration more. And there were many reasons for it. I think when you are a business owner, you understand businesses better. And so that was part of it. But also I found that it was more challenging, more interesting. I like the clients that are smarter, quicker to understand things. They're savvier. I say things once generally, and I get the documentation. I found it a better fit for my personality, the way I want my practice to be. And I found that for me, this was a more fulfilling area of law when somebody has been wanting to develop their business for a long time, and the only thing that's setting them back is immigration. And oddly enough, that is how I really got into advocacy about why there isn't a startup visa. Time and time again, I kept seeing people who wanted to start their own businesses, but they're in the backlog of the immigration. I call it black hole, actually, because you're not coming out of it to get a green card and then do your own thing. And the AC-21 portability rules, even though somebody might get an EAD and have a same or similar job, it doesn't necessarily help you with the ability to pay issue when you're a startup. So, and there are many challenges that I continue to see on a regular basis for people who wanted to start their own companies but couldn't, whether they're coming from a different country or they're already here in the immigration backlog. So my business has really become focused on business immigration, but even more so on entrepreneurs.
Is there a specific visa category that you really enjoy doing?
I find the L's very interesting, the E's very interesting. I find them all interesting. I find anything that's challenging is interesting. I find the challenge to fuel me.
Yeah.
The self-employed H-1B, for example, it frustrates me a lot about why can't this founder have an H-1B? And why do we have to kill so many trees to prove that he is being controlled by the company? But then to actually get that approval is extremely rewarding, not only for me, but to see the happiness on my client's face. I can give you an example of a particularly rewarding case. My client was an OPT, and he's actually given permission to talk about his case in the past. And we filed for an H-1B under the CAP in 2014. And, we were very careful about making sure the co-founder had signed all the paperwork. And when we filed the application, they gave me a corporate check. And we filed the petition, and then it took 6-7 months. It was under regular processing. No, 6-7 weeks to get the receipt notice or the return package. Because we didn't get a receipt notice, so we assumed it wouldn't be picked in the lottery. When we got the rejected file, it didn't look like the ordinary rejected file. It said, your application was picked, but sorry, we're rejecting it for improperly filed. So, I was immediately very shocked and upset about, I couldn't understand what went wrong. And eventually we, looking at everything very carefully after I calmed down, looked at the USCIS. I mean, instantly you think, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, it's a heart-wrenching process.
And then what am I going to tell my client, Because the lottery, you have lost this huge opportunity. Even if you file the next year, there's no guarantee you'll be picked. It's an incredible loss. So after reading the letter carefully, we saw that the government said, well, your I-129 check was signed by the beneficiary. And then I thought to myself, hang on, this is a corporate check. So then I had to really research and understand, how do I fight this? This is a young man with dreams for his company. He's relying on me to get his visa. How can I fight for him? How can I be his best advocate? And so I sat down and thought to myself, I went back to all the material that had come out when the self-employed H-1B announcements were made. And it did say, if you're a sole proprietor, you can apply for an H-1B. Now, if you're a sole proprietor, who's going to write your business checks for you?
Exactly.
So I went back to my client and said, get me all the account opening documents. Who opened the business account? So he got me all the documentation to show he was the one who opened the business account. This check was indeed a corporate check. And we initially went to a congressman in California to help us solve the problem, and it didn't go anywhere. During that time, I had gone to an AILA conference, annual conference, where I had stood in line for a long time to speak to one of the USCIS officials who was speaking on a panel, and I explained this problem. And she said, here's my card, let you know. And I contacted her saying, she was in customer service. And I explained, look, if you are going to allow sole proprietors to apply for self-employed H-1Bs, then this is a ridiculous rule that you have here that they can't sign this check. And she obviously agreed. And then when the congressman route didn't work, I then reached out to her, and then I went to the customer service, the ladder, so to speak, and eventually they reassessed the case, and then they accepted the case. And that by itself was a huge win, because a rejected H-1B, how many times have you heard of a rejected H-1B being taken back into the cap?
That's real accomplishment. That's dedication that you did that. Congratulations.
That's a big deal. Thank you. It was dogged determination to get my clients.
How long did that take, though? Because I know USCIS could be slow. Did you file an emotional reopen, or was it just behind the scenes you worked with them to fix it?
We couldn't file a motion to reopen because there was no case to reopen. Mm-hmm. If it's not on your system, there's no case to reopen. You don't have a case. The challenge was to make it a case, to be accepted as a case. And it took several months. It maybe took 8-9 months to get to that point. In the meantime, the client had to leave the country.
Wow.
And, it was detrimental to their business. Mm-hmm. And I continued to be determined. And eventually we get the dreaded Neufeld memo, employer-employee RFE. And that by itself, again, was a challenge. But eventually we got an approval. And I think that was one of my biggest accomplishments in fighting for an entrepreneur who is going to be creating jobs in this country, helping the economy. It has so much potential, and that's what frustrates me about the visa system that we have. It's not recognizing the modern way of doing business with an idea, getting funded by somebody else, and using that money as the basis of getting a work visa. Mm-hmm. Why do we have to go through this rigmarole of proving the entity controls you? Because we all know that if you are a business owner, as you might know, John, you're not just a lawyer. Mm-hmm. You're doing a lot more than just being a lawyer, just like I'm doing a lot more than just being a lawyer.
Was this where the energy came for your book? Was it this case, or just accumulation of these kind of cases and these kind of experiences? What was it that led you to decide to write a book?
The accumulation of experience is what made me write so much. I was writing on my blog. I was writing in publications, whether it was an op-ed or a letter to the editor. I was vocal about the issue. And what that led to reporters coming to me, mm-hmm. talking about this issue. And when the first bill was dropped on the startup visa in 2010, I realized that would be the solution to this problem. So I started to follow the path of that bill, and I followed the many iterations of that bill over the years. And then in 2013, as you may know, there was a comprehensive immigration reform bill. Mm-hmm. And that bill, dropped around midnight. There was an email in my inbox at midnight saying, here's the immigration reform bill. And, we were all, as immigration lawyers, anticipating it. But for me, when I saw that email, I had a jolt of lightning in me almost, because I knew, or at least I was anticipating, there would be a startup visa element in that bill. So immediately I sifted through the 1,000 pages or whatever, I can't even remember how many pages it was, and I found the startup visa provisions in it. And immediately I started to go to work. I read every word. By the time people woke up at 5 a.m., I had a summary of the language in it, that this is what the startup visa provisions are going to be. And what that did was other people who were interested, and there were a handful in this particular issue, we got very closely connected. And then we started to look at the bill a little bit more deeply, to analyze what needs to be fixed in this particular, only the startup provisions, nothing else. I didn't touch anything else in the bill yet. How to make it better. Now that I'm a business owner, now that I'm a lawyer, how can I make this bill perfect for my clients? And with this team that we, by default, came to be, my friend's name is Craig Montori, and this other friend is called Manli Leong, and they're all mentioned in my blog. We started to brainstorm, and Craig had relationships with Senator Moran's office, and we started to work with them to propose edits that could be done to the bill to make it perfect. And Senator Moran, Kansas Republican senator, has been a champion on this issue for all these years. So he was very accepting, and he worked with us, his office worked with us, and we proposed various edits which were actually accepted and drafted into statute or bill language, and then put forward, filed as amendments. When the immigration reform bill passed, these did not pass because there was so much politics involved, if you like. Not many people's amendments did get through, but it got the relationship out there. It got me some experience in how to propose edits and amendments to bills, but more importantly, more credibility on this issue. And as I was writing about this and talking about it more and more, and when it became more apparent that immigration reform wasn't really going to happen, I wrote to the White House, basically urging President Obama to take executive action. And, you know, I'm one of many, many, many voices, but I realized that my voice makes a difference. I'm one voice, but I can make a difference. And I wrote that letter to him. I didn't get a response. I sent that letter several times to the White House, and eventually got a response basically saying, you know, thank you, and we're looking into it. And, you know, several months later, executive action happened. But what happened over the course of time is I had a lot of material on my blog. I was talking to senators, congressmen, and I was saying, go to my blog and, you know, read about this. A former client and a dear friend basically said to me, Tahmina, you have so much information on your blog and you're advocating for this issue. Your content needs to be in one spot. You should write a book. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, when am I going to get time to write a book? But I took that to heart. And even though he gave me this advice about 3 years ago, it took me a year and a half to really find the time and then start writing the book. And it took a good year and a little bit to actually put the book together. And in my mind, I thought it was going to be easy because I had all this content. Mm-hmm. I just had to put the book together. But in reality, content that's written at different times in different contexts don't necessarily become a book. And you really need to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And the book has to flow. And your information has to really gel together. And editing the content was probably more difficult than writing the book from afresh.
Now, I'm writing a book, and I'd like to get more information about that. What was your process to edit? How many times did you edit? Did you have an outside team helping you? Did you hire somebody? How did that all work out?
It's very interesting, and had I known what I know now, I don't know if I would have taken the
Then don't tell me.
But I hired an outside team really to help me do a little bit of editing. I thought that was necessary, but help put the book together. I did have a publisher, a publisher that was interested in publishing my book, and it was going to be a fantastic publisher, exactly for the audience that I wanted. The trouble was that they were going to do an ebook only. and it was going to be sometime at an unknown time in the future that they would get to it. And for me, there was executive action that was going to happen. There was urgency in my mind. And, you know, I'm a busy mother of two with a busy practice. I can't wait for an unknown time. So then I thought, you know, I'm just going to self-publish. But then I needed people to help me with the publishing aspect of it. So I did hire a great team.
And self-publishing, I'm really, that's the way I think I'm going to do my book and books in the future if I can finish them. How difficult is self-publishing, or do you have your hands wrapped around it, you can figure it out? Or
no, I wouldn't even be able to tell you, frankly, but my focus was really making sure the content was good. And then I was letting this team do it. But the team that I hired from the editing perspective wasn't going to meet the editing expectation that I had. And then when I had my first draft ready and I showed it to a friend, this was earlier in the year, she said to me, Tahmina, this book really needs to be split into two. One is textbooks for lawyers to learn immigration law, and one is a history of immigration law. And I thought, you know, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to advocate for change here. So then I was a little bit disheartened, and I had to think outside the box again about how do I accomplish what I set to achieve. And as luck would have it, a reporter, her name was Lornette Turnbull. She used to be a reporter with the Seattle Times, and she specifically reported on immigration law. She contacted me out of the blue, and I had, believe it or not, been praying for her for a while, saying I need somebody like her to help me. And long story short, she started to help me editing my book. And it's only when she looked at my book and gave me like a 2-page challenge of just very, you know, no spaced bullet points of these need to be changed. And you need to address these issues, that eventually I got to the book that I wanted it to be. But I tell you, I was working midnight to 5 a.m. on my book for many, many, many weeks and nights and months, actually. You know, and unless you have that kind of dedication and passion while you're a working person, professional, I don't know where you get the time to do this. But it's a short book, and my goal was to make sure it was accessible to the lay person, and the two audience that I had in mind were politicians who are creating laws and policies, but also the startup community that really will benefit from this law change, so that they can be their advocates for themselves. But they needed to understand it in very simple language. You know, the jargon that we use with USCIS on a daily basis wouldn't be understood by everybody, not even by politicians, frankly. Yeah. And so I wanted it to be simple and accessible, and it's a short book, so it wouldn't be onerous to read and understand the issue. So it's about 80 pages, it wasn't easy, and I was very relieved that it was finally done. And I was very lucky that I had the opportunity to launch my book at a tech conference called South by Southwest.
Oh, that's a big one.
Which is an annual conference in Austin, Texas. About 30,000 people attend it. And I was extremely fortunate to have a book reading session and a book signing session. And that was essentially the launch of it. I was additionally very lucky that the foreword of my book was written by a prominent academic, entrepreneur, startup advocate. You know, he's a think tank. His name is Vivek Wada. He writes about immigration issues and many other things, actually, women in law, in tech and entrepreneurship. But he was one of the earlier people advocating for immigration reform for entrepreneurs. He wrote a book called The Immigrant Exodus, and talks about the brain drain problem that the country is having, where talented people are leaving the US. And I had the opportunity to work with him when we were going through the Senate amendments. So he was very gracious and kind to write the foreword in my book. So on many levels, I've been very fortunate and very lucky, but all of it was possible because of the dedication that I had put into this issue for many, many, many years, and many years to how I'm relentless. I will not stop until I see change in the law.
How's how does it reflect in the upcoming elections and the current climate towards immigration related to this specific topic?
I think the next presidential election is going to be very interesting, particularly for us immigration lawyers, where I think we all need to step up. I think immigration is going to be front and center of the campaign issues. And if we want to see a better US, both economically, both humanely, we need to protect our clients. We need to be the voice for our clients. We need to be the voice for a sensible immigration system in this country. So I, for one, will be stepping up my advocacy as much as I possibly can. And I urge you to do it, John, and I urge anybody that you know to do it as well, because votes matter, who we vote for matter, these issues matter, and maybe California, in where you live and where I live, we might be voting for somebody who will have sensible ideas for immigration reform, but maybe some of our family members and friends live in areas where there are leaders that do not think the same way. I think our job will be to help our friends and colleagues, family members, help understand the issues where they live so that they can vote for the right person. So I think as immigration lawyers, we really need to step up for this next presidential election.
Definitely. Do you think there is going to be, a lot of talk about immigration, especially with regards to candidate Trump and other ones in the Republican side, talk about border issues and such. But do you think there is a change and a negative that's possible for business-based immigration? I know there's a renewal for the EB-5 program coming up at the end of this month. And I have this issue a lot of people when they hear immigration attorney, they're like, oh, election is going to affect you. But because I do mainly business, the impact isn't going to be as different based on any negative legislation as possible because there's nothing coming up, I don't believe. But there is an issue of expanding it towards entrepreneurs, and a lot of people here, where I'm close to Santa Monica, in what they call it, Silicon Beach. So there's a lot of people that are potential employees or business people that can use immigration stuff. Do you see anything happening negative towards the business practice, or is it more advocacy to be more inclusive of these kind of topics or areas of immigration?
Well, let me split that question up in two. One is executive action, and one is what's going to happen in the future of immigration in this country. Mm-hmm. Executive action, I think I absolutely applaud President Obama for making the changes that he has been making on his own. And he's basically tweaking policy to make the laws, policies better for people, our clients, immigrants in general.
The visa bulletin change was really interesting, happened a couple of days ago. It's going to be really helpful in employment-based categories especially.
Right. I think that's a very profound change, and if there's one change that's going to be high impact, that's the one I believe that's going to make it. But I think for entrepreneurs, some changes are going to be happening soon, and I hope to see them pretty soon. I don't know when, but I hope in the next weeks. And so that's executive action. In terms of the rhetoric and what would happen in the future, if we have a Republican Congress, a Republican president, I see that being a negative for businesses. We need more H-1Bs, absolutely need more H-1Bs. Businesses like Microsoft, Amazon, where I live and where you live, you have, Facebook and other big companies that are looking for talent, and we don't have it. The Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill earmarked money for STEM education. We are lacking STEM educated graduates that will take these jobs that are necessary. So there is no talent or enough talent, and we need the immigration laws to reflect the ability to hire more talent. If we have Republican leadership, I don't see us having more H-1Bs in that regard. I don't see us getting any type of positive immigration bills until border security is dealt with. And what does that mean? From my understanding, border security means that they will institute border security laws with many more border officers and fences and stuff, but they will also have to implement them before they even look at legal immigration. That is no way for a country to be operating. We are falling behind other countries that are making immigration policies, their strategies for financial improvement, financial gain and development. Look at Europe, look at Latin America, look at Canada, look at Australia. Look at these countries that are making immigration part of their economic development. And what America is doing is really talking, it's really rhetoric. It's all about negative ideas, you know, even to deport or remove 11 million undocumented people is going to cost an astronomical amount of money. Where is that money coming from? That money needs to go into STEM education. Our schools in Seattle at the moment, we're going through strikes because teachers don't have enough money. Yet this money is going to be given to border patrol people or the border security. You know, I just think that priorities are not being considered properly, and the country is not going to be in the position it needs to be 10 years from now. What kind of country will our children be living in? So I think people really need to pay attention to the next presidential election. And I would ask your listeners, immigration lawyers, really to take note of these issues and take part in the conversation. Engage your family and friends in areas where, you know, immigration reform is not going to be done by the leadership of those areas, because that's where the votes are really going to matter.
I agree. I don't think creating a bigger police state with more border walls and fences and police and law enforcement is necessarily just conducive to any sort of prosperity for the country. So investing money in growth rather than negative growth, I guess, it's not the way to go forward. But that's a challenge for our times. Going back to the immigration group, I wanted to go back to your practice and how that's working out. How you really, for me as a sole practitioner who kind of shies away from expanding, how have you dealt with having a team of people and having to manage and that taking the focus off clients and the law and those kind of stuff? How's that worked out for you?
I think it's happened organically, and it's happened as the business has grown and as I've had children. I've been very, very fortunate in having a team that I trust 100%, and a team that I can rely on and depend on. And as the business has grown, everyone in my office has grown as well. And everyone is open to doing anything in the office. I think if you have one mindset of just doing one thing, it's not teamwork. And what's happened in my office, as the children have been born and grown, part of what they have, and just to give you an example of the dedication that we have here, is everyone's been a babysitter. You know, I have had days where from morning to afternoon I've had back-to-back meetings, and all of a sudden a child has been sent home from daycare, and then it's past the baby in the office. Who's doing what when? Between my team and my husband, it's been a juggling act. How do you manage it is really, I believe in open communication, and I believe in trusting and respecting, and I don't micromanage. I don't have time to micromanage. So I think, you know, I have always been scared at every step of the way. You know, nobody teaches you how you be an employer, how you deal with things. You don't even know the IRS is going to come and hound you for payroll taxes, which happens so frequently for me. Even though I have a fantastic bookkeeper and accountant, you don't know what these challenges will be until you face them. But the only thing that I can tell you is, unless you do it, you don't know. And if you don't take the step towards growth, then you're static. And if you are doing good work, you know, there's that one person that you can't help if you don't have the help to help you. So really it's about learning, growing, adapting, evolving. And I can't tell you that anybody gave me a manual. I'm just doing what feels right. And I think you go with your gut instinct.
How do you do quality control? Do you have any systems in place? Are there any like computer software systems to manage and follow things up?
we use INS Zoom as our database. I have a fantastic team that really tries to keep on top of things. We have the calendar on INS Zoom. We have our Outlook calendar that we use. We use a wall calendar. You know, you can't calendar enough, frankly.
Yeah.
And
That's what I want to talk about. Like, just to reiterate, I have an online calendar. I have 2 wall calendars on my phone. That the calendar in multiple iterations of it is really key.
Right. And I feel like, you know, somebody's got to be organized. And the person who's running around sometimes is not the most organized person, but I've been very lucky to have several people like that on my team. But I think, you know, everyone being on the same page and having the same dedication for your clients and making sure that your clients are taken care of is key. But over time, I think training is very important, making sure that they're learning how you want to do things and how it should be done is key. So I think training takes time, and, you know, making sure that everyone's learning at the pace that they can. So when you hire your first, you know, employee, my suggestion is make sure you do it slowly and make sure that they're comfortable. But ultimately go with your gut instinct. Again, that's what I do. Nobody's taught me what to do. I just go with what feels right, not just for me, for them too.
Have there been any books that or things that you recommend for practicing law or helping a practice that you've read or heard that have been helpful?
You know, as it happens, there is. When I started practicing immigration law all those years ago, I thought to myself, how do I learn this? How do I know this vast area of law that I have no idea where to even begin? And I did a Google search, and my partner really didn't, you know, I was just learning what to do by her telling me what to do. It's not like she said, go and read this book. And at that time, I didn't even have a Kurzban because I was just relying on her to tell me what to do. And Google searching and searching on Amazon, I found this book called Nutshell on Immigration. And it was a very small, maybe not even 1 inch thick book, about, you know, 5 by 8, maybe, or about 5 by 7, you know, big. You can get it on Amazon. And it's a summary of all the visa categories. And it gives you a history of immigration law as it is today, how it, you know, from all those years ago. And I made that a compulsory read. So when each of my paralegals have started, I made sure that they had a book. I recently hired a contract attorney with the view of her becoming my associate. She has that book. That's my one book that I make sure that they have at hand, because it's a quick summary.
Thanks for sharing that. I was the same thing when I started another firm. I just my Bible encyclopedia was the other associate, but that's not enough. You need to learn all the visa categories at least somewhat, and really get into the rules and law and read as much as you can to really grasp the intricacies of immigration law.
Right. And then, you know, about 3 years after I started to practice, I bought a Kurzban, and I thought to myself, gosh, why did I not have it the first day of practicing? So, you know, now anybody who's new, I say, if there's one investment you make it into Kurzban. You know, because it's a starting point. And most immigration lawyers are members of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, and I honestly couldn't practice without them. And I highly recommend that, you know, if you are going to be practicing immigration law, become a member of AILA, because the resources that you will find are invaluable. You know, when I first became an AILA member and I was writing the check for membership, I thought, oh my gosh, that's so much money. And then when, you know, time goes by and I'm now writing my membership at the higher level, I'm like, that's the best darn money I've ever spent. You know, because it really is the access to the resources, the books, the content, the message board, the practice guidance, people like yourself that you can go to for mentorship. It's unprecedented, and it's so collegial generally. You know, because we're all fighting the government, most of our colleagues are actually very hospitable, welcoming, warm, and they want to be mentors. So I have found that when I have reached out to somebody, another AILA member, 100% of the time, people have been extremely helpful. I solved one of my most complicated removal cases based upon guidance given to me in the early days from a mentor question I posed to somebody I didn't know. And it was one of those complicated questions about false claim to citizenship. How do I fight this challenge where this guy has several children in this country and a wife that needs help? And generally, you know that false claim to citizenship is the one,
it's a tough one,
crime, if you like,
yeah.
that does not have a waiver. And I eventually won that case, and they're happily living in this country with a permanent green card. And I don't know if we'll get citizenship. That's a different challenge altogether. But I fought this case and won it over a course of several years. But the initial strategy was helped by a mentor that I had never met. And when I finally won the case many years ago, she had long forgotten about me. But I sent her this huge box of, little, chocolates and stuff. I can't remember what I sent. But, I was so grateful for that guidance. So any new lawyer that, is listening to your show, know that AILA is really a resource that they cannot and should not practice without if they're going to do justice to their clients.
I agree 100%. Unfortunately, I didn't sign up a couple years into practicing immigration. And it's just the amount of friends I've made, the amount of information, connections, help me resolve problems. It's an excellent resource, and I'm not getting paid or anything by it, as you're not either. Like, it's just outstanding. If you're an immigration attorney, you have to be AILA member. There's no, you just disservice your clients to not be a member with the amount of information, knowledge that you just get for free from members once you're a member.
Right.
Okay, so how does your week look like? I know every day looks different. How do you balance out your week with your personal life as well?
If you asked me 4 weeks ago, I would have told you something very different. But 4 weeks ago, I moved houses, and that's been a rather big challenge in shifting how I work.
Are you farther from work now or closer?
Father, and my daughter started school recently, so I had to move to a good school district. Mm-hmm. But I was living in the heart of downtown Seattle, and my office was very close to my home. So in the olden days, I maximized every minute of the day. I'd wake up, take my children to get them ready for daycare, take them to school, daycare, come back and start working, whether it's 8:39, and then I'd non-stop work until about 5:30, and that includes seeing the clients, doing the work, doing admin stuff, some marketing. There's just so much to do, and I just wouldn't even know how it became 5:30 in the day. And I'd run and get my children, put them, deal with their food and bathing, and put them to sleep, and then part two of my day would begin, where I'd work again. And often it's because there are deadlines that need to be met, and as you know, if there's a deadline, nothing stops until that deadline has been met. And then all this writing I was doing for my book was happening really midnight to 5 a.m. constantly. And so that's how my day would look 4 weeks ago. Now my day looks a little bit different, where I wake up at the crack of dawn and I try to beat traffic, get into the office very early, and then I'm leaving the office very early so I can beat traffic. But it's interesting because this transition is making me work differently too. So ask me in another month or so, and then I'll be able to tell you how this transition has gone. But really, I was working a lot of hours up until four weeks ago because I had that convenience. But now that convenience has gone away, so now I'm still trying to work it out. And luckily, I don't have that many deadlines strung together where, everything, 10 deadlines in 1 week is rather stressful, but my new window of deadlines is coming up in a couple of weeks, so I'll probably figure it out.
Now, how does
different
the number of deadlines, the stress of if a case is going to get approved or not, if a client's going to, have to leave the country or not, does that affect your personal life? Does it affect your sleep? How's that been for you?
When there is a deadline, and if everybody in the office actually, we all calendar what's coming up, and then we work towards that. And whichever, I explain it to my clients this way: which baby is crying the most that needs to be fed? That's how you prioritize the deadlines and focus on them. And so it's all hands on deck at the time, and everyone plays a different part in all of these cases, whether it's an initial filing because the visa is going to run out, or there's an RFE deadline which has a different stance to it. And then we also calendar which day copying can be done. Can it be all staggered together on that day? It's prioritizing and strategizing. How can you efficiently meet all of these deadlines that in a way that you can still win your case? In terms of taking the cases home, yes, I do in fact stress over cases very often, all the time in fact. Because my ultimate goal is to have a happy client and a successful case, because each case is my reputation and my reputation is on the line. But more importantly, somebody's dream is really at risk here, whether it's their family member coming into the US, or whether their business, whether they'll make or break that business. So that, I feel that is a very big burden on my shoulders. And I say this to everybody when there's a particularly complicated case, I'm like making that filing look pretty. I'm saying a prayer as I send it out. I look at it over and over again, and then they have to pull it out of my hands. Like, that's okay, you don't have to look at it anymore. So but once it's off the table and it's gone to FedEx, I try not to think about it too much, because the next deadline is quickly upon me.
Yeah.
But it's really, really making sure that you have given 100% to that case, because that's your one chance to make sure that that client gets an approval.
And speaking of mailing out, today I'm on the 14th day of a premium processing for an L1B. And I haven't got any response yet. I'm like, okay, today or tomorrow it's either RFE or approval, and I'm hoping approval.
I hope so too. I mean, when it gets to the 10th day, I tell my clients, look, if you haven't got an approval yet, be prepared. We could get a nasty RFE.
Yeah, I really don't want to respond to an L1B RFE, because I don't even know what they're going to throw at me.
Oh, yeah, and you're probably working with a new L1B policy memo at this point.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's that. It's a new company, or what do they call it? It's a new business. It's only been less than a year, so they're supposed to be a little more lenient on those. Hopefully they'll go with that, but we'll see. Today or tomorrow I'll know how much more work I'm going to have this month.
Well, good luck, and keep me posted. I'd be very interested in knowing how the new policy is being implemented.
I will. One kind of different question is, how are the asylum timelines working out in Seattle? Have any recent active cases?
I do. I have one particular case that's been pending for, I don't know, it's coming up to 18 months or 2 years at this point.
Wow.
It's been a long time.
So you're having
So,
the Southern California type of timelines as well.
right, and I think, it's the San Francisco office that looks after us as well. So I think if you have a backlog, we have a backlog.
Mm.
Yeah,
It's unfortunate.
I have a question for you.
Hmm.
What do you think will be the outcome of the EB-5 bill pending?
Well, the current one, I'm guessing they're going to extend it, but I'm assuming they're going to increase the minimum investment, because it's been the same amount for so long. Uh, and I've looked over, and I did a actual podcast going over I think it was a Senate bill that they proposed. It's kind of all over the place. They really harp on the security issues, which I really don't think are that big a problem, because the State Department does a great job of reviewing people. And I deal with a lot of clients from Iran, so I already know how difficult it is for them to get a green card or immigrant visa, or even a non-immigrant visa, and how much background checks they have to go through. So I think it's more of a political situation of just getting people happy with the idea of foreigners coming. It's going to continue, I think, just increase price. One thing I was really looking forward to was them saying they're going to allow adjustment of status to occur along with the I-526. But with the new visa bulletin updates, that just happened automatically, I think, for EB-5. So that was really a happy situation. I would like them to increase the number, the cap, but that's probably not going to happen. So more security features, more crackdowns on the regional centers, higher price for investment. But it's a good program, so I think they're going to renew it. It has enough supporters that's going to have it renew.
Yeah, I feel like the renewal is absolute foregone conclusion it will happen. I just worry about all the other things that may or may not happen. It'll be interesting to see if they do raise the amount to 800 or 1.2 million.
Mhm.
It'll be very interesting to see whether that
But
happens.
one worry I have is increased scrutiny on source of funds because overseas people don't keep track of their money like they do in the U.S. and they don't have tax systems like we do here. So it's already hard enough if they make even higher standard for a bar for source of funds. That's going to really be distressful for my practice, especially with a lot of Middle Eastern clients and the way they deal with their money issues and keep track of their money. That's one big one. I mean, the increase in funds to 800,000 we can deal with, but them giving denials for source of funds is going to be a really stressful process for me.
Interesting. And what are your feelings on charging regional centers $20,000 a year?
That was interesting. It's kind of good because we have like 700 regional centers, and most of them don't even have a website when I go look for them. So it'll give some more legitimacy because that way the regional centers they got to put some money down. Um, so it's kind of makes it more legit. Anything that makes the program more legitimate and gets people not to say, oh, people are just buying green cards and there's some sort of frauds going on, that'll help. I like that. Um, and the regional center is just going to take it on the clients with the administrative fees. So they're going to make it on the other end. And if it just creates a little more security in the regional center system for the clients and the immigrant investors, I'm okay with that. That money is going to be used to have more scrutiny on the regional centers, and that could be a net positive over time. Anything to increase the legitimacy of the system. So I lose a lot of clients I have consultations with. I mean, in 2009, 2011 for EB-5, they just want to get a green card. As long as I told them, like, there's a good chance, as long as the jobs are created, you'll get it, they were happy. They wouldn't ask about getting their money back. But since 2011 till now, or more or less 2 years, the primary is, am I going to get my money back? Are they going to steal it? There's these kind of issues that come up, and I didn't have that discussion a few years ago. So anything that could give them relief on the investment side as well, and have more legitimacy in the companies they're investing with is a net positive. As long as they're not ridiculous enforcement criteria, I'll be very happy with that.
Very good, very good. Yeah, well, that's good to know your views on it. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Do you feel that in recent weeks there's been a lot of negative press on EB-5s?
Yeah, I
More
keep track of
ups.
it. Yeah. I mean, I have a Google alert for the term EB-5, so I every day I see what the vibe is, and it happens in certain states in particular where their local newspapers are constantly attack the program. Uh, it's sometimes it's ridiculous. There was a front page story in the Wall Street Journal actually. I think it was yesterday. I talked about EB-5. It wasn't as negative. It was more neutral. I read all the articles about people saying I wish they did a better job, but they didn't attack the program, which I was happy about. A lot of it. One thing it's like my pet peeve is I used to even do it first, saying it's like, oh, and you buy a green card to make it easy for the client to understand. But I think that's a pejorative. It shouldn't be said like that because the program is much more complicated and doesn't service to the fact that it's a job creation program. And creating 10 jobs is not an easy thing to do, especially with the regulatory environment the U.S. is in. We have with healthcare expensive, and payroll, and minimum wage increasing. So you got to understand you're investing in a business, you're creating jobs, you're being an entrepreneur. It's called the EB-5's entrepreneur program or something like that as well. So it's not just you buying a green card. There's a lot more to it. The security aspects of the source of funds have been put out there in the press that, I mean, literally you have to get sometimes bank documents from 20 years ago to show how this person made this money. So it's not fair to say some like criminal is just sending money over here and investing in the U.S. It's nothing of the sort. Letting people know the security and background checks. I mean, I've had EB-5 client take 7 months after they did their embassy interview just to get the clearance to enter the U.S. So the FBI, CIA, and all these 16 intelligence groups, they're all into it and they're all looking. And then they have to do removal of conditions. So there's going to be another layer of security checks that happen. So I don't have any fear of the security aspect of it. I don't have any fear of the source of funds. The exposés I've seen on the news that have been, I think, is just yellow journalism. I really think they're attacking the program in an unwarranted fashion. They're having fraud, and they're catching that. I think it was in Seattle, actually, in Bellevue, where they just caught some guy, or at least let's say allegedly accused them. I think it was an Asian gentleman who was like a monk and who got tens of millions and they disappeared. That's the accusation so far. So they're catching him. Am I correct on that? On the facts of that?
Yes. It's front page news on many news articles, news publications. But yes, I feel like as the bill is going to be renewed and decided, this is the time where a lot of negative press is coming in to, smear the program, so to speak.
I'm kind of at a loss for why they would not like the program. Like the people who, there's Michelle Malkin, I think, writes about, oh, this is like we're selling out the U.S. citizenship. I don't understand the few number of people that are coming through this program who are becoming U.S. taxpayers, who are multi-millionaires, who will all of a sudden get taxed on their worldwide income. They're educated. They're going to have their children go to like good schools, and I don't see why they're attacking something like this, other than just for the sake of having a punching bag. And it's still, I don't understand why people would be negative towards such a program. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, no, it's. I find that the program is misunderstood or misrepresented, and I think this is again where immigration lawyers need to step up. I mean, we have so much responsibility because of the knowledge and expertise we have that anytime I see anybody, I'm like, you've got to talk up, because who else is going to do it? So, well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tahmina. It was a great pleasure.
All right, take care, John. Thank you again for having me. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you for listening. To learn more about this program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Also, attorneys can visit www.immigrationlawyerslistserv.com to learn more about special listservs for immigration lawyers that provide forums to discuss professional questions and issues and exchange information with other practitioners from across the globe.